Well, thank you, Stacy, and welcome to everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're at. My name is Devin Beckus. I am a fleet services representative, and I work out of the Harrisburg Fleet Management Center in central Pennsylvania. Welcome to today's desktop workshop of what is your personal liability while driving a government-owned vehicle. Like Stacy said, there's a lot of good information here, and I recommend have something to write on, have something to write with for questions that you might have later. And at the very end, if you have something kind of unique, a question wise, uh, feel free to send me an email on it and I'll get you an answer or get you pointed in the right direction. So here we go. All right. So what happens if you cause a vehicle accident while driving a government owned vehicle? Some questions that you might have. Well, you have to pay money out of your own pocket. Can you be sued? Really good question. And are you covered by insurance? Well, possibly. Another good question to ask is, do you have the policies in place to protect yourself and your people? But the ultimate question of today's session is, are you personally liable if you're involved in a vehicle accident while driving a government-owned vehicle and you're in fault? Now, this includes all government-owned vehicles, whether they're GSA leased, agency-owned, whether they're tactical or non-tactical, or or they're special service. These unique vehicles, much like here. If you've been to my presentations before, I am a firefighter, retired firefighter from the Air Force. And I like to highlight some of my local fire departments here. And this picture is courtesy of firefighter EMT Matt Hinken. This is the DLA Susquehanna Fire and Emergency Services Station 69. All of this information, it applies to them as well when they're driving their fire department vehicles. Now, with any good class, any good presentation, there's always that disclaimer. And this information provided does not constitute legal advice, as any such advice would need to be based upon an analysis of law applied to specific facts by your agency. And for specific guidance, contact your agency fleet manager and or your agency's general counsel, the legal office, because each agency may handle liability a little bit differently. And if you happen to be doing a YouTube or Google search, please look for the most recent posted presentation. It has the up-to-date information. Why is this training important? I sat down one day and I had a conversation with a guy named Irv Kohler. And Irv dropped some good knowledge on me. And we were talking about this presentation. He said, Devin, he says, knowledge is power. He said, knowledge is power. The more you understand and know about the liability topic, the better you can protect yourself and your agency. And another thing to keep in mind, always on offense. Yeah, we have a sports analogy in here, but always on offense. Being on offense is a whole lot better than being on defense. You're better prepared to meet the challenges of your everyday operations, and you don't ever have to worry about being on the defensive side. As I'm going through the presentation, I'm going to point out things that I'm referring to when I say always on offense. So here's what we're going to cover. In part one, we'll discuss official use. We'll talk about your responsibilities when using a government vehicle. We'll talk about what's permissible and impermissible. We'll dive into scope of employment, liability assigned. We'll cover the Federal Tort Claims Act. And then part three, this is some of the best information out there. We're going to talk about privately owned vehicles on government business, and we're going to discuss rental cars, liability and official business. This is updated information. There's some pretty important stuff in there. All right, here we go. Official use. What is it? Why is it? How is it that we are allowed to take a government vehicle and drive from point A to point B or use that vehicle to do something? Well, what that is called official use, and it's using that government motor vehicle to perform your agency's mission as authorized by your agency. Your agency says what you can do, not me. I work for GSA Fleet, and if you happen to use a GSA Fleet leased vehicle, it's not prudent for me to tell you what you can and cannot do. Your agency says that, not me. And that agency lead, they make the decision. Now, who is the agency lead? It's someone in your chain of command, someone who knows what's going on with your mission. Could be a supervisor, could be a shop lead, but they are also the approval authority to authorize non-federal individuals to accompany you in a government vehicle, whether it's family members or military recruits or contractors. They also can authorize incidental use. What is incidental use? It is using a government motor vehicle for other than official purposes. Using a government vehicle for other than official purposes. Well, wait, Devin, that doesn't make sense. How is it that I can only use a vehicle for official use, but you're telling me that I can use it for unofficial? Let me explain. If your agency allows it, you can use that vehicle as, say, a side trip, unofficial or other than official use. So for me, we have, or I should say had, a marshaling contractor in Scranton, PA, and that's about a 2.5 hour drive. So when I go from point A to point B, 2.5 hours, I got 2.5 hours back. There's 5 hours there. I have to meet my customer, discuss what's going on, and take care of some things up there. Well, you figure I should be able to eat lunch. The incidental use is me being able to take that government vehicle to a restaurant in that area. I'm allowed, my agency says I am allowed to do that. Additionally, I could use that same vehicle to stop at a gas station to use the restroom facility if that were the case. That's incidental use. Now, depending on what type of incidental use you have, it could be a taxable benefit. When you get the slide deck, all these links are hyperlinked. Take a look at page 36. In most cases, it doesn't affect us. We need to keep in mind what is okay for one agency may not be okay for another as far as official use goes. These are 3 different incidents that I've been personally involved in some way or another, and I'll let you decide. But the first one, a government vehicle parked at a gentleman's club, aka a strip club. Okay? What do you think? Official or not? Well, in most cases, no. In most cases, no. But there is a case by one specific agency where they may have to go to a strip club. After doing this class for a few years, I had a person from the IRS reach out and they said, Devin, we actually have to go visit these places. And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. This could be a great story. But each individual dancer is self-employed, and it's about collecting taxes, federal taxes, for their job. Another one, and more recently, we had a government vehicle at a fine wine and good spirits store. It's a PA-based liquor store. And the individual was there in a government vehicle buying alcohol, not just alcohol, a specific alcohol. A Midwinter Night's Summer Dram Rye whiskey must be pretty good, good enough to put your career on the line. But this knucklehead was out there and he was bragging about his supervisor, telling him, yeah, he sends me down to Kentucky whenever a specific whiskey is sent to the base exchange. You got to be kidding me, folks. We shouldn't do that. It's not official in any way, shape, or form. Now, this last one, government vehicle parked at a local grocery or home improvement store, I've done this several times. When I've been on a temporary duty assignment, I can take my government vehicle to a grocery store. Got to eat. And if I can make my stuff, great. But the home improvement store, I told you I was a firefighter. And we would routinely take our utility vehicle down to the local Home Depot or Walmart or some other place like that. See, we would build props to use for the fire department. For us, that was official. Had to get the wood, had to get the hardware to build these props. Because it was part of our job, it was no problem. But you take another agency on the base, I was stationed at Elmendorf for quite a while, they may not have that same latitude or official use because of the job that they do. All right, so your responsibilities. All right, you must obey all motor vehicle traffic laws of the state and local jurisdiction, except where the duties of your position require otherwise. Now, this reference doesn't exist. It is being transitioned right now, but what it's saying still applies. All right, you have to drive with due regard for safety. You have to obey the speed limit. You have to do things like that. Now, if your position requires otherwise, what agencies out there can speed and go through stop signs and stuff like that? Well, pretty much your emergency services can. However, being a firefighter, we have to stop at red lights and stop signs, clear the intersection, and then go. Drive with due regard for safety. Now, if you happen to be fined for an offense you commit while performing your official duties but wasn't required, well, that payment is on you. You got to pay that fine. And if you receive a parking or moving violation while operating a government vehicle, you're responsible for paying that fine and you're not going to be reimbursed. You will not be reimbursed, and you can't use appropriated funds to pay those fines. That agency is responsible. The agency driver specifically is responsible. Now, I've had people tell me, hey, Devin, we get these video speeding tickets months after. How do I find out who that person is that's driving? Well, if the picture wasn't clear, you want to have a log for your drivers. And in gsafleet.gov, there's a dispatch log. And if you have that dispatch log, you can go back to that person and say, hey, you were driving at this time and you have to pay this fine. Now, I'm going to caveat into an email that I received yesterday. One of my customers, using their geotab, had a vehicle that was going in excess of 90 miles an hour. If we happen to get a video speeding ticket for that vehicle, we know exactly who to send it to because it was actually at a vendor. And the dealership where it was being fixed, the service tech took that thing on a nice little joyride. But we've got all the evidence, all the proof. It's not necessarily a dispatch log, but we actually have the geotab data as well too. That's another thing you can use as well, is the geotab data. Now, you must pay parking fees and tolls while operating a motor vehicle owned or leased by the government, and you can expect to be reimbursed for the parking and tolls while performing official duties. As we talk a bit about legal terms, when you see expect to, yeah, that's kind of one of those, yeah, little asterisk, maybe. So ideally, we want to save taxpayer dollars. And if you have two lots, one on one side of the road, one on the other, one is free, we would expect you to use that one that doesn't cost the government money. However, if you're in a part of town that isn't great and the other one has fence and it's secured and monitored, then by all means, pay that whatever it is to protect that government asset, because you still have to protect that as well. Now, toll violations. If you happen to get a toll violation, usually they come in the mail, sometimes months after. Work with whatever state toll authority that you have to pay that fee. And in most cases, you can use appropriated funds to pay those tolls. One of my coworkers had this same thing, this exact thing happened to him. He was a TDY and he was in Pittsburgh, had to go to Buffalo, New York. And normally not bad, but if you get on Interstate 90, for those of you East Coasters, I-90 is a toll road. We had the little transponder. To the best of our knowledge, it was working great until 6 months later after the trip, and we finally got the toll violation notice at our office. What ended up happening is that the notice was sent, but it got bounced around the federal building. They didn't know really where to send it to. It wasn't exactly marked or addressed very well. So when we got it, we worked with the New York State Toll Authority. It was not an issue. They were able to take a look at the picture and they were able to show that, oh yeah, hey, there's a transponder. We didn't pick it up. We paid the fee. They removed the fines for us. We paid the fee with a GPC and all was good. Okay, new information, updated. Home to work transportation. There's a new home to work reference and it's 102-34.205. And what that is the FPMR, Federal Property Management Regulation System, Federal Management Regulation for personal property, and it goes into subpart D, and that is government motor vehicle use. But what this is now is this is a government motor vehicle use for transportation between an employee's residence and place of employment. This is the home to work, the domicile to duty. Please get a read on this if you happen to have any home to work vehicles. Employees engaged in field work or faced with a clear and present danger, an emergency, and so on, or compelling operational consideration may utilize home to work transportation only, bold letters, big letters, all cap, when authorized by the agency head after making the determinations under 31 USC 1344. Who's that agency head? Oh, great question. I'm glad you asked. It's that highest official of a federal agency. Period. End of story. Highest official. If you're in the Air Force, it's the Secretary of the Air Force. If you work for FAA, it's that Secretary of Transportation. Yeah, there's the highest level. It cannot be delegated, period. Cannot be delegated. Here's why you should review. Because if you have yours approved by anyone other than that agency head, it's not valid. But who's going to know? Really, I mean, no one's going to know until something happens. Until something happens, unless something happens and it becomes part of my desktop workshop, and usually that's bad. So get on offense, always on offense. Ask the questions now. So the determinations must be in writing and should be completed before an employee is provided home to work transportation, always on offense. Those authorizations must be renewed, and typical is field work. That's every 2 years. And then the not so typical is 15 days for other circumstances, the emergencies and whatnot. Now, unique And the same as before, home to work does not apply to transportation used in conjunction with official travel, including temporary duty assignment, TDY, or relocation, performance of intelligence, counterintelligence, protective services, or criminal law enforcement duties. Okay, so on the TDY thing, let me explain. If in fact you're going on a temporary duty assignment and you get to take a government vehicle, if your agency allows it, you can take that government motor vehicle home before starting your TDY if it's advantageous to the government. So for me, I live in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and I have to drive 30 miles one way to our office. If GSA allowed it, I could take that vehicle home, providing that I'm going the opposite direction. So that would save me 50 miles of driving, probably about an hour and a half of time. And it's more advantageous because I'm saving time and I can get to the my TDY location faster. But it's not blanket authority. It just allows it if your agency does. It authorizes it if your agency allows it. So you want to follow your agency's guidance on official travel if you're going to use that GOV in conjunction with your TDY travel. You want to have it approved beforehand. I would not get a verbal approval. Verbal is not good enough. It needs to be designated in writing by the agency head. Whether you use go.gov, which is a new government travel, DTS, My Travel, or whatever agency-specific system you use for authorizing that TDY travel. Get it in writing. Selective amnesia is real. Selective amnesia is absolutely real. You don't want to get it verbally and they say, and your supervisor say, oh, I never said that. Get it in writing. Always on offense. So what about government vehicles between work and mass transit facilities? Well, it's now covered under 102-34.210. You can use a government motor vehicle between your workstation and places of mass transit. The head of the agency must make a determination. It's got to be invalid. It has to be in writing, and it's valid for a year. And there's no safe and reliable commercial or duplicative federal mass transportation services that meet the same route. And the transportation is made available to other federal employees. And then, of course, you want to use AFVs to the maximum extent practicable. Other conditions do apply. Read the new reference. But here's the problem with this one. Not problem, but just something you got to consider. Where it says no safe and reliable commercial or duplicative federal mass transportation services, we have a lot of commercial transportation services, Uber, Lyft, taxis, bus. You actually may not be able to use that government vehicle if this other stuff is available. But you got to think of convenience as well too. Is it available at 2 in the morning if you have to go at 2 in the morning? So take a read. It's new. It's updated. Make sure you're doing the right thing. All right, so here's some things that you can do with your government vehicle. You can make rounds of your area work sites. You can attend official meetings, attend official training, and going on official errands, whether it's a post office, court, car maintenance, car washes, from your TDY station to your hotel. The one word that rings true is official, official, official. Make sure what you're using that government vehicle for is approved, authorized, and official use. Now, a little different is permissible use of your GOV while on a temporary duty assignment. Going to a drugstore, a grocery store, a barber shop, attend worship services, eating at restaurants, visiting a laundromat or a dry cleaner, and similar places necessary for the sustenance, comfort, and health of the employee. What does that mean? It's a lot of words. Could get you in trouble. Things like that are hard to define, all right? But when I see that and necessary for the sustenance, comfort, or health, I'm thinking like a gym. Now, a lot of the hotels that we have a gym, but if you happen to be a gym rat and you're hardcore working out, CrossFit, things like that, I could see where you could use that government vehicle to go to a place like that. What about extended temporary duty assignments? Are there any places that you shouldn't visit? Things like that are going to be agency specific. And I would work with your agency fleet manager and or maybe even HR, human resources, to find out. Make sure you're doing the right thing. Ask permission first. In this case, it's better to ask permission than forgiveness, because a lot of times when you're on the forgiveness side, you're on defense and something has happened. Some examples of impermissible use of a GOV: go into a private social function, whether it's a birthday, a retirement party, going to a bar or strip club, transporting people not authorized to be in that GOV. If you do, they may not be covered under that Federal Tort Claims Act. You potentially could be liable for their injuries. And doing personal errands. And if you're in a leadership position, don't send your subordinates to do personal errands. That is not good. That's foul. You're setting them up for failure. We don't want that to happen. Some more things you should not do with these vehicles: engage in entertainment activities while on TDY, say the mall or a movie, attend local sporting events or attractions, and picking up hitchhikers. Now, on the local sporting events or in attractions, there's some agencies out there that actually this is part of their official use. The Veterans Administration, they routinely take injured vets to sporting events and attractions, but that's part of their mission. That's what they do, and it's okay for them. I work for GSA. That's not okay for me. Now, what happens if you live in a cold weather state? What do you do? What if you end up, can you use that vehicle to help out? Well, what I recommend is, if you're a fleet manager, have a policy, write a policy on how to address those emergency situations. If you're a driver, know the policy, find out if there is one. And if not, ask. For me working for GSA, it is lined out, it is spelled out in our policy document for driving vehicles. And it says it is official business when a GOV is used to render assistance in major disasters or emergency situations. So I'm covered. Told you I go to Scranton. If I happen to be going to Scranton and someone has a wreck, I can pull over to render assistance. Or if there's a disabled vehicle, I can, and I'm okay. I'm covered. What do? Pick them up, take the next exit, get them somewhere warm, get them somewhere safe. I used to live in Alaska, and we may not have had a legal duty to stop, but there certainly was a moral duty to stop, because there's places where I've been where the ambient air temperature was 50 below zero minus wind chill, not counting the wind chill. That was the actual weather. A person could freeze in a matter of minutes. Find out, ask the question, make sure you're doing the right thing. Some more examples of impermissible use of a government vehicle: carrying a personally owned firearm in a government vehicle. Now, generally speaking, you cannot carry a privately owned firearm in a government vehicle unless you're performing a law enforcement mission. I have no case law. I have no regulation. I have nothing to direct you that says yes or no other than the law enforcement. So consult your agency fleet manager or your general counsel for specific information and or possible authorization. And carrying medical marijuana in a GOV for a patient, that's not allowed, because currently any use of marijuana is still not legal under federal law. And even though it's legal in some states, it's still not legal according to the federal government. So what happens? Yeah, you do a little bit of bad stuff with the government. What's the worst could happen? Well, your misuse, willful misuse, the minimum is a suspension of 30 days without pay, a free vacation. All right. That's the minimum. The maximum is removal. I am aware of people who have actually been removed from their position for misuse of a government-owned vehicle. Maybe next year I'll throw that picture in. It's actually quite stunning. All right, Devin. What if? Devin's got a lot of good what ifs. So, good friend of mine, John DeWolf, early on, we've been doing these early desktop workshops. We would get these questions, and we would have a person that they said, well, you cannot use a GOV to engage in entertainment activities while on TDY at the mall or movie. Yeah, I did say that. And they would ask, well, what if the restaurant's in the mall? Can I eat there, then go see a movie? No, you can eat there, no problem. But you cross a line. You cross a line when you go see the movie. But really, who's going to know? You know, I'm not encouraging you to do that, but really, who's going to know? They'll know when something happens, and that's usually when something happens. Well, this same person came back and said, what if I park on the other side of the street? They were thinking, I'm going to park on the other side because that makes it right. Can I go to the mall to shop or watch a movie? No, you cannot. It's not official use. And then this one, kind of scary, absolutely true, real question. We thought the guy might have been, pulling our leg. No. What if I drink alcohol during dinner? Can I drive a GOV as long as my blood alcohol content is below the legal limit? Oh my goodness. No. See, everyone, perception's reality. When you're driving that government vehicle, you're a target. You're a target for scrutiny. They're looking for you to do something wrong. And man, oh man, they're going to report you. And I'll show you here real quick. Don't ever drink alcohol and drive. Please don't ever drink alcohol and drive. I alluded to me being a firefighter. I have seen what happens on the other side of that. Please don't. And be prepared to justify your actions. Don't risk it. All right. Permissible or impermissible? This is an incident that was reported to How's My Driving at GSA.gov. It says, "Good afternoon. I'm a concerned citizen writing in. Government waste is a big ticket item these days. I'd like to voice a concern. On Friday, July 4th, around 15:42 p.m. Alaska Standard Time, at the Pump House Restaurant, Fairbanks, Alaska, 99701, I witnessed a GOV truck being used for the transport of kayaks and passengers. Attached are images. Please let me know if this use of government vehicles is encouraged by the Alaska state government and or the federal government." Now, let's break this email down. 15:42 p.m. The individual is associated with the military in some way, shape, or form. Also, the address. I'm sorry, the date, July 4th. And then they weren't exactly sure if it was a state or a government vehicle. But I want to show you the picture. This is awesome. It is a GSA vehicle. Here's the context that they missed. It's the 4th of July in Fairbanks, Alaska, 24 hours of sunlight. This is the National Park Service doing their job. They don't get holidays. They're out there on the water, patrolling and making sure that the people that are up there having a good time are having a good time and not getting themselves hurt. So it's things like this that this is totally 100% mission authorized. They're supposed to do, and people are going to report it. So in this case, when I say, basically be aware and don't risk it, there's no risk here. They're doing their job. But what happens if there's an accident? Say something goes bad and you have an accident. And mind you, they're accidents. They're not on purposes. We don't, we kind of, villainize the people who have an accident, but they're not intentional. But an investigation is started. And what they're going to find out was the government employee negligent. Were they obeying the law, speeding under the influence of drugs, alcohol? Were they texting or talking on their cell phone? Were they within their scope of employment? We'll talk about that in a second. This investigation that has started can get very, very, very uncomfortable because they will break down everything to see what happened. And sometimes it takes years. I had one person who attended my class. I think they were at either 4 or 6 years, really. It took that long, and multiple depositions. Depositions. So what is scope of employment? What's a legal term? It's an activity authorized by a competent authority, whether it's your supervisor, standard operating procedure, policy, or orders, and you are serving at least in part a government purpose. There's a little bit of gray area right there because they're going to look at it. Well, were they serving a government purpose? It's determined by state law where the accident occurs. That's a critical component. We've got some case law we'll discuss. And under circumstances where the U.S., if a private person will be liable to the claimant under state law. Basically what it means is, would a civilian be liable if they were driving and faced with a similar condition? It's thorough, folks. And most of the time, the accidents we have, it never goes this far. They're very simple. But when there's bad accidents, then we go through this. Some things that they're looking for, some of the factors, the time, place, and occasion of the accident. Was it during normal business hours? Well, what's normal? If you're in the military, it's 24/7. For me, my work hours are 6:30 to 3. If I have an accident at 3:30, I've got some answering to do. They're going to ask, why are you still in a government vehicle? Some more things that they look at is an act commonly done by such an employee. Do others do a similar function? And what was the extent of departure from normal methods? How far out of line did they go? And this is the part where it gets uncomfortable because why were you doing this? And you got to answer the questions. I don't know is not a good defense. And is it an act the employer could reasonably have anticipated? Was the act motivated to serve the employer, or was it personal? Was it within the general authority given by the employer in furtherance of the employer's business and for the accomplishment of the objective which employed? Now, the neat part is that the Justice Department does make the final decision, but it's a back and forth between the plaintiff and the accused and the attorneys and the state and the federal government. It's a long process, but it is thorough. Rest assured, it is very thorough. Some out of scope of examples: commuting to and from work. It depends on state laws. Intoxicated or willful negligence is generally not in scope. And I say generally, that should almost scare you because I have case law where a person was intoxicated, hit a guy on a bike, left the scene, and was found to be within the scope of his employment. He got in trouble, but still was found to be within the scope of employment. Very unique case. Using the vehicle without permission, also known as stolen. Deviating from the route is generally not in scope. Now, to explain deviating from the route, if you're going from point A to point B and you get detoured because of road work, a vehicle accident, or something that is not deviating from your route, you're not taking a side trip. Deviating from your route is, say you've got to go from point A to point B, and you stop at a mall 50 miles out of your way. You've deviated from where you were supposed to go. That's deviating from your route. And then the accident occurred when not doing something to promote the mission of the agency is generally not in scope. It's things that they look at in earnest to figure out what is actually going on. Okay. Now, a word of warning to anyone. I've got vehicle accident pictures coming in on the next few slides. These are accidents I've actually been on. And just know that everyone that was in these is safe, okay, and uninjured. Seatbelts and airbags are phenomenal. Oh, and so are guardrails. Okay, scope of employment case study number 1 is Boscolo v. the United States, March 2017. So here's the synopsis of this. A U.S. Marshal was provided a government vehicle for official use. He had home to work authorization. Additionally, he had his estranged wife's house listed on his home to work document on his paper. While en route from his house to his place of employment, he's going to work in the morning. The marshal received a text message from his estranged wife. Okay, there's a first file. He's texting and driving at the same time. Anyway, his wife said that his son was ill and the marshal needed to take care of him. Marshal sent a message to his supervisor asking for leave, asked for sick leave. It was granted. And once it was approved, he drove to his estranged ex-wife's house in the government vehicle. He had his wife's house on his form. He took care of his son. He did the right dad stuff. Dad took the day off so the wife, the kid's mom could work. And then at approximately 4:15, he left his ex-wife's house and got into an accident. He got into a bad accident. He hit a vehicle so hard it rolled it. Now, a lot of times they're not necessarily common because accidents do happen. But what do you think? What do you think? You don't have to put anything in the Q&A, but based on what I've told you, you could make a case that, yeah, he's within a scope of employment. He went to his wife's house. Her address is there. Well, the scope of employment had to be proven, and the burden was on the plaintiff. They couldn't provide substantiated evidence that the driver was within his scope of employment. And the court found that the U.S. Marshal was acting outside the scope of his employment. And it dismissed the claim against the defendant, United States of America, because the marshal was acting outside of the scope of employment. He's liable for the accident injury claims. And the question is why? Here's the answer. He had home to work. He didn't have home to home. And when he went from his wife's house to his house, that's where the violation occurred. This was approximately 3 years to come up with this outcome. 3 years. But it's very thorough. And they go through policies. They go through a whole lot of stuff. The second one is Singleton versus Birchfield from February 25th, 2025. This one, fairly recent, and it is the only case law that I have that shows how the state has an impact. But basically, we had a young airman who was at Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama for Airman Leadership School. He was issued a government vehicle, and he could take that government vehicle around. And the day of the accident, they tried to make a case that, he should have stayed on base instead of going to Tony Roma's. Well, anyway, he went to the gym, went to school, showered, and him and his class were meeting at Tony Roma's for a study session. No problem. Everything's cool. So he gets to the intersection to make the left turn into the complex where the restaurant was. Light turns yellow, and he's gone out in the intersection like we do if we're going to make that left-hand turn. Light turns yellow. There's a vehicle that's coming the other way. It stopped, but the truck behind that vehicle didn't. They sped up, come around that first vehicle, and T-boned the guy in his government vehicle. Now, the thing of it was, the questions that were asked are a couple of things. It was a little bit about uninsured motorists because the federal vehicle is, of course, self-insured. And the other person tried to make a case that, well, he should have never even been out there because he was doing everything else on base. But for those of you that are in the military, meals were not available or directed, meaning they couldn't eat at the dining facility. So they went to Tony Roma's. He had to go out and they were doing a study session. But the unique part about this case is that according to Air Force instruction, the motor vehicle should be operated as follows between places of business, lodging, eating establishments, drugstores, barbershop, and places of worship. But the best part under Alabama law, the use of a vehicle owned by an employer creates an administrative presumption that the employee was acting within the scope of his employment. Simply because he was driving that government vehicle under Alabama law, he was covered. Very, very unique. All right, so we talk about liability. What does it mean? Well, simply meaning it means you're responsible. If you have kids, you're liable for their kids if they do something wrong. And how is it going to impact you if you're found at fault? Good question. You have to pay money? Maybe. You have to pay for damage? Possibly. So if you're driving a government vehicle and you're faulted for causing an accident, injury, or damage, and you're acting within your scope of employment, you're covered by the Federal Tort Claims Act. Federal Tort Claims Act will cover you. And this only applies to the third-party claims, i.e., that's the other vehicle, the other person, okay? And if you're not acting in your scope of employment and cause an accident, injury, or damage while using your government vehicle, you're personally liable. You're going to need a good lawyer and hopefully a good insurance company. What the Federal Tort Claims Act does is it allows individuals to recover against the federal government for personal injury, wrongful death, property damage, and so on. But it's from that federal employee who is acting within their scope of employment. That's the kicker. They have to be acting within their scope of employment. And the only type of relief under the FTCA is money damages. And really what it boils down to is it does come out, it's about the money from the standpoint of, if I happen to hit a 57 Chevy and I'm found to be within my scope of employment, it's going to be easier just to pay money to have them, replace that vehicle as best they can versus me trying to find another 57 Chevy. The Federal Employees Liability Reform and Tort Compensation Act of 1988, basically, it amended the Federal Tort Claims Act. It's now the exclusive remedy for torts committed by federal employees within their scope of employment. And generally speaking, you're protected from being personally sued by a third party as long as you're acting within your scope of employment. When things like this happen, a lot of the times the attorneys are going for the deep pockets, and usually that's the federal government. And once again, with any good rule, there's an exception. And 28 U.S.C. provides that the Federal Tort Claims Act does not apply to claims arising out of assault, battery, abuse of process, and so on. There's a huge list here. Unless the U.S. government may be held liable for any of the first 6 torts: assault, battery, false imprisonment, false arrest, malicious prosecution, if committed by an investigative or law enforcement officer of the United States government. But basically, the Federal Tort Claims Act is the federal government's insurance policy. It substitutes the federal government for the individual as a defendant. Now, whoever the using or owning agency, whoever they are, they're the ones that actually pay that third-party claim if the driver is at fault and working within their scope of employment. So if you happen to be involved in a vehicle accident, whether you're the driver or you happen to be the fleet manager, and you're within your scope of, actually, regardless if you're within your scope of employment or not, but mainly if you're within your scope of employment, work with your agency's legal office because they're the POC agency for legal claims against the government. So if you're in any branch of the military, it's the JAG, the Judge Advocate General. Now, additionally, please work with that third-party driver. Unfortunately, because of the desktop workshops, I routinely get emails from people who have been hit by a government vehicle saying, hey, I don't know who to get a hold of, or I've contacted them and they have not got back with me. Can you help me? Work with them. Give them your legal team's phone numbers, a way to contact. Because what I do is I just go to the agency fleet manager and say, hey, this person had this accident. It was then. And here's the tag number, here's the point of contact. Can you please get with them? And then, just like anything else, they probably follow up with some great hate and discontent email. So what about contractors? Can contractors drive a GOV? Can they ride in a GOV? How are they covered while driving? Well, it depends on how that contract is written. If it's cost reimbursable, meaning leased directly from GSA, they have to abide by FAR 51.2. This is the important thing. It's the sole responsibility of that contracting officer to ensure the requirements are met. Contracting officers responsible. And FAR 51-202 requires contractors leasing directly from GSA to provide proof of vehicle liability insurance. And my good friend Stacy, the lady who opened up this great class, she gave me this reference, and the reference is fantastic. FAR 28.307-2. She has the liability insurance requirements. That's where you go. It's got great information. Now, if you, the federal agency, are providing leased or owned vehicles to a contractor in the performance of a contract, you, being that federal agency, you're responsible to ensure the contract clauses are in place to protect the government's interests. And once again, reference FAR 28.307-2 for information on liability insurance requirements. And the question that we routinely get, are government contractors allowed to ride in a GOV? Reference slide 7. Yes, they can, providing it's authorized. Anyone here driving Canada or Mexico? If you do, listen up, good information. Many foreign countries, including Canada, do not recognize U.S. government self-insurance. If you're driving a GOV in Canada or Mexico and your agency is not covered by a SOFA or other diplomatic treaty which specifically addresses liability issues, all right, and SOFA is a standard of forces agreement, GSA's General Counsel Office determined that an agency must purchase additional liability insurance to operate vehicles in foreign countries. Now, unless your mission is covered by a diplomatic treaty or SOFA, most civilian agencies, they're not covered by a treaty or SOFA. So what you want to do is work with your legal team and find out if you need to have the additional liability insurance. So if you do, shoot me an email. Other students who are in this class provided me some great information, some great assets to get that liability insurance that you need. All right. The Federal Tort Claims Act doesn't protect federal employees outside the United States. Work with your agency's general counsel for assistance. And if you have a short duration trip, consider commercial rentals that are inclusive of insurance in foreign countries. All right. We've discussed the third party. We've covered a lot of stuff about, if you hit someone else, but what about damage to that government vehicle? All right. What about it? Well, the pretense, the government employees, they're at fault. There's damage to the government vehicle. The Federal Tort Claims Act protects them from third-party liability. But can you, the driver, be held liable for the damage to the government vehicle? Yes, you absolutely can. 100%. The driver can, but it's not quite as easy as you may think. The Federal Tort Claims Act protects that third party, but it doesn't cover the damage to the agency-owned or leased GSA vehicle. The guidance is based on a Department of Justice ruling for the EPA, and the reference is there if you want to take a look at it. But there's a policy. Policy is going to vary by each agency, but typically a board of survey is convened to review the case. It is an official investigative and vetting process. They have to prove some type of negligence. They have to say, hey, you did this and you were negligent. Once again, it's the accident. It's not an on purpose. But that same investigation will decide if the at-fault driver has to pay for damages to the government vehicle. And an example are the Army FLIPL or an Air Force report of survey. I've mentioned this before, and in the past, I had a specific agency. I won't name who they are, but they were blankly or blindly charging a, quote, deductible to any driver that was in an accident, whether they were hit or someone hit them. And we provided this information to the supervisor, who said, it doesn't matter. We're doing it anyway. And after all was said and done, it didn't turn out quite as well as a person had thought, because that was actually illegal. There was no due process. And why they were charging a deductible for someone who got hit was beyond me. So if this is your agency and you have this, review that policy. Make sure it's up to date. Make sure it's good to go. And if you're the driver, find out. Ask questions. All right, POV stuff, the hot topic. Oh, good stuff. So in most cases, the use of personal vehicles for the benefit of the government is prohibited unless officially authorized. And when it's authorized, the employee is reimbursed on a mileage basis. And it depends on the mileage. The reimbursement depends if there's a government vehicle available or not. And the cost of collision and liability insurance is a component of that mileage reimbursement. But if you're involved in an accident in your POV, you were at fault and had proper authorization to use your POV for government business, you cannot be held liable for damage or injury to third parties if acting within your scope of employment. You're covered under the Federal Tort Claims Act. Now, this doesn't indemnify the employee from discipline or adverse actions for negligence. You can go back to that. We were talking about the discipline part. They could. I don't have any case law, thank goodness, of anyone who was actually in an accident with their POV and anything happened. But I don't recommend it. Here's why. You as the employee must seek reimbursement from your private insurance carrier for that loss. The government's not going to do it. They will not pay for any of your stuff. That's why you get paid mileage. Before you use your vehicle for work-related travel, meaning federal work-related travel, contact your insurance carrier to see if and how you're covered. You want to research what type of coverage you might need. It might be an umbrella policy or a special rider. Make sure you have the proper coverage to protect your vehicle. So for me, what I did, I contacted my insurance company, State Farm. I said, hey, I want to use my vehicle for government business. What do I need to do? He said, my insurance agency agent, good guy. He said, okay, federal government. I said, yes. He said, okay, how many people? So what do you mean? He said, how many people will be riding with you? I said, well, just me. He's like, okay. It ended up being a total of $6 per 6 months. Had I intended, or if I was going to have more people ride in my vehicle, it would have been more. But it was a simple rider and it was inexpensive. I talked to other people who had been in this class who looked and asked their insurance company, and not only did they find out they weren't covered, they found out that if they actually got into an accident, they'd have been dropped. So ask the question beforehand. Folks, this is one of the best always on offense examples that I can give you. Now, if you do happen to get into an accident, and in your POV, you can file a claim under the Military Personnel and Civilian Employees Claims Act for the deductible of your insurance company. Work with your JAG, your general counsel, to process a claim. Now, you can file a claim. Doesn't mean they're going to pay it. There's no guarantee it's going to be paid, but at least there's an avenue out there to where you could pay it. The key word for using your POV on government business is authorized. We talked about selective amnesia. Folks, we don't want that to happen to you. Selective amnesia is real, and really it's amazing. Just ask my kids and my wife. I have a lot of it all the time. But in this case, an employee, you cannot arbitrarily use their vehicle without proper authorization to perform government business and expect to be covered. All right. Rental cars. This is some new stuff. New stuff. If you don't have rental agreement number 5, please take a look at it. Really good information there. And some things have changed from rental agreement number 4. But generally, drivers are covered under the Federal Tort Claims Act. The scope of employment and the official use rules apply. We pay a government rate when we go on TDY. The rental costs provide a myriad of protections to those drivers. It's a hyperlinked document. Here's what it says. All right, this is in part. It says the company and not the renter or the U.S. government hereby assumes and shall bear the entire risk of loss of or damage to the rented vehicle, including the cost of towing, administrative costs, loss of use, replacements, and any and every cause whatsoever, included but not limited to casualty, collision, fire, flood, upset, malicious mischief, vandalism, tire damage, falling objects, overhead damage, glass breakage, strike, civil commotion, and this is the best one, theft and mysterious disappearance. And it goes on. And now they're also, just with anything else, it starts out with it, except. There are some exceptions, intentional, but a lot of people don't know that. And this is provided just by paying that government rate. And when you go get your vehicle and they say, hey, you want the extra insurance, most people don't realize it's already provided. There are now some limitations for people, for ages of people to drive. Take a look at rental agreement number 5. Fantastic updated information. But with those rental cars, what about after hours or extended TDYs? We talked a little bit about that. Can you use that rental vehicle for personal use? Well, according to 41 CFR 301-10.450, it was updated in 2022. In paragraph F, they added, it clarifies how that rental vehicle can be used. It says for official purposes only. There's no mention of personal use at all, period. Here's what it says. A rental car is to be used only for official purposes, which include transportation between places of official business, between such places of temporary lodging when public transportation is unavailable, or its use is impractical, or between either subpart 1 or 2 of this paragraph and restaurants, drugstores, and so on. You cannot use this for personal use. What is personal use? Going to the grocery store is not personal use. That's allowed. You're TDY. Okay? Go into a grocery store or worship service. Yeah, you can do that. Absolutely. When you start crossing that line when you're trying to go to the mall to eat and then watch a movie, or go visit your friends because they happen to be close, their house. That's where things get very, very great. Okay. And to close out on the personal use of the rental vehicles, it's not that we don't want you to go. You can get there. You just have to use a different mode of transportation. Uber, Lyft, taxi, bus, train, if that's available, if you're down in the DC area. It's not that it can't be done. It's not we don't want you to have a good time on your off time, but we also want you to be protected so that you don't end up as one of the case studies on this presentation. All right, folks, we're about at the end. You heard me talk for an hour. The ultimate question of the session: are you personally liable if you're involved in a vehicle accident and driving a government vehicle and you're at fault? And the answer is, well, most definitely maybe. It depends on the mitigating circumstances, but including but not limited to official use, scope of employment, the state the accident was at, and fault. Contact your agency fleet manager and or your general counsel for more information. All right, here's what we talked about. We went over your responsibilities when using a GOV. We talked about official use and misuse. We talked about permissible and impermissible use, scope of employment, liability assigned, covered the Federal Tort Claims Act. We talked about privately owned vehicles on government business, rental cars, and we answered the liability question. The next couple of slides are references, but here's the best part. If you have something unique or you have a question, here's my email. We have 2 more trainings this month. And if you found value in this class, please send it out to anyone and everyone who you think could benefit from this. That would be that would be good. Actually, for just so most people are aware, we've had a total of 928 people in this presentation. So thanks everyone for hanging around. We have a bunch of questions right now, 22, and we're going to start going from the top down. Tony says tolls are not authorized by GTC unless they are on DTS orders, correct? Tony, I'm going to say no based on what I told you in the scenario, because we used a government we used a government purchase card. We use a GPC to pay that toll minus a fine. So as far as travel card goes, I would ask whoever your travel card program manager is and ask that question, because a lot of times I don't know of any toll booth. I don't know of any toll booth that actually takes a credit card. But in that scenario that I presented, that real world scenario, we use a government purchase card to pay that fee. Edward says, for agency approval for taking a vehicle home for TDY travel, if the car is being used from another agency, which agency or both needs to approve the vehicle being taken home when it is advantageous to the government. So basically, Edward's question, it sounds like they're using a vehicle that actually belongs to a different agency. What I would do is, it wouldn't hurt Edward to get permission from both, or if you're using another agency's vehicle, get that vehicle signed to your agency, and then make sure that it's in writing on those orders. You're not going to get in trouble for getting more approvals than what you may think you need. All right, Michael says, is a rented vehicle at a TDY training considered within this policy? Yes, Michael, we actually just covered the rental vehicles, and yeah, official use only. Louise says, does all this apply to overseas as well? For the most part, yes, Louise. I would say the official use and all that stuff does, absolutely. However, wherever you're at, is there a treaty and or a status of forces agreement? Take a look at that, because that will trump what you see here. Actually, that is the rule of the land, because the Federal Tort Claims Act does not apply outside of the United States. Brian says, what is GSA's take on a traveler under official duties driving a NTV, non-tactical vehicle on a highway, keeping up with traffic, however, is going faster than the posted speed limit, I-95 in Maryland, Virginia, comes to mind. Is there a recommendation as not to be a hazard to other drivers? Brian, thank goodness that is not a GSA issue. That is on your agency. Drive with due regard for safety. And if everyone around you is going 70 miles an hour and you're going if everyone around you is going 90 and you're going 65, you are going to get a truck in your rear bumper and just a lot of great hate and discontent. Drive with due regard for safety. That's the best thing I can tell you, because you don't want to be that hazard that causes the accidents. But in your case, whatever agency you work for, ask that question to the legal team and or the agency fleet manager. I'd like to get their take on it. That's actually a good one. Roberto says, what would happen if the airport authority tows the government vehicle? Well, they would tow it, and then you would have to pay to get it out of Hawk. That's what happens. Phil says, if we rent a car to travel for job-related training, do the same rules apply? Typically, I rent the day before departure and take it home. So yeah, the official use rules apply no matter how you get that rental vehicle for TDY. If you get it before, you're using that rental vehicle under your travel orders. but you want to make sure that you've got or rented the vehicle under the correct rate so that you get the extra protections under rental agreement number 5. Jane says, if I need to use my personal vehicle for official use and there is an accident, do I manage that wreck using the accident kit the same way I would using the GOV? Do I carry the accident kit with me in my personal vehicle? Absolutely not, Jane. If you use your personal vehicle, that's on your personal insurance. What I would do though, okay, I would let them know that you're using your vehicle for official travel. You're going to have to get with your agency fleet manager and work all that stuff through there. But initially, everything's going through your insurance. Your JAG's going to have to step in afterwards and make all of that other stuff happen. Excuse me. All right, next one. Samuel says, I'm a disabled employee and I have disability plates on my POV. Does GSA or federal agencies have disability permits for GOV use? No, Samuel, we do not. We do not have those. However, what you can do is take that card. If you have a card that goes in your rearview mirror, that is assigned to you, not your vehicle. You could use that in your government vehicle without an issue. And if you don't have one, I don't know what it would take to get one, but if that's the case, one thing, human resources, I would start there. If you have to get one, good question. We don't get that one often. Thank you. Yvette says, I work at Youth Treatment Center and we use our GSA vehicles to transport clients on outings along with other staff. Are the clients covered under the insurance? Well, Yvette, if that's part of your mission, I would have to say yes. Trust but verify. Work with your agency and find out. Just say, hey, here's my situation. If we get into an accident, are the kids covered? Like I say, I would happen to say yes because that is your mission and that's all part of what you do. Now, if you happen to be Department of Labor, Job Corps, I do believe you have secondary insurance, personal liability insurance and whatnot as far as driving those vehicles. But once again, trust but verify, ask that question and find out. Walter says, how are vehicles covered that is on the AOA? Okay, Walter, I don't know what AOA is. So if you could, yeah, if you can down below, I'll answer it later. I got 18 questions above you. Actually, hang on, you might have done that. Nope. Okay. So we'll get to that AOA question in a minute. Anthony says, would it be a good policy to have your users give the FM contact information as a POC and not their personal or official information as at the scene of an accident or incident? So when you have an accident or an incident, on the back of that accident kit, it has all the information to give. You can't not give your personal information because you were the driver, but you can also provide the agency POC and then work through that. Because initially, for me, if I happen to get into an accident, I want to know the person that was driving and get a picture of their driver's license, their insurance card, just to protect myself. Like I said about that one person who got ghosted when they got into an accident and hit by a government vehicle. It's not necessarily the FM contact, it's not the finance contact. It would be the legal team because the legal team is the only one who can process a claim against the government. But having it in there, contacts change. Contacts change. So that's probably not a good idea. Maybe let your drivers know, hey, if this happens, this is who you're going to need to contact with all of the have to go with them to take care of it. Looks like Gianni says, what are the rules with vehicles that are rented during a TDY or government approved travel within scope of employment? I think we covered that pretty well. Basically, bottom line is official use only, no personal use, and there you go. All right, Walter, this is a follow-up. How are rental vehicles covered that are operated on the AOA? And that's one thing. I got to find out what AOA is. I'm going to head down to the bottom there. If anyone can chime in. Yeah, okay. I'm going to leave that one there. And we'll just go on to the next one.
Devin, it's airport operation area.
Okay. So if it's a rental vehicle, if it's a government rental vehicle, it's just as I've explained. It doesn't matter where it's being used at. And if they're towing trailers and whatnot, same thing. If you're towing a trailer and you cause damage, you're within your scope of employment. That same thing applies. You're still going to go through your legal team to take care of that issue. Walter, does that answer your question? Michael says, if you're found liable for the damage during an accident, can you use your personal insurance to cover those expenses? I would assume this would only be a possibility if they had full coverage on their own personal vehicle, but not positive. Michael, I get that question a lot, and I don't have a good answer for you other than reach out to your insurance company, give them that scenario. Hey, here's what's happening, and of course, hypothetical, and ask them what that is. It might be a rider. It might be a rider for other owned vehicles. So yeah, contact whoever your insurance company is and ask that question. Paula says, did Devin just say that if a government vehicle is available and you decide to use your POV and you have an accident, reimbursement is not guaranteed, if at all? No, that's not what I said, Paula. I said that if you use your POV versus a GOV and you have authorization, you're going to get paid at a reduced rate. I'm not sure what the reduced mileage rate is, but yeah, that's what I had mentioned. John says, are other military members on TDY with you allowed to drive rental vehicles, or do they have to be on the agreement too? So take a look at rental agreement number 5. From memory, don't quote me because I'm not absolutely sure. I know there's some changes that any government employee can drive that vehicle, but there are now age restrictions for certain vehicles. And I don't recall what they are, but it is in rental agreement number 5. What if you're on TDY and have dinner at a friend's house? Then you are in violation. That's personal use. And, like I said before, who's going to know? No one until something happens or someone reports you. But I mean, if you're in a rental vehicle, they're not going to know if you're in a government vehicle, then someone's going to dime you out. So in that case, I would recommend Uber, Lyft, or have your friend come pick you up. And it's nothing more than about protecting yourself, just making sure that you're covered and taking care of you. Marianne says, good morning. I came a little late, so I'm not quite sure if I missed it, but what is the process when a GOV vehicle hits a parked vehicle during work hours on base? Thank you. I can also email Devin if needed. I'll make it easy for you there, Miss Marie. Just report it as an accident. Okay. If you hit a parked vehicle, of course, fill out the standard Form 91, get the other person's information on there. GSA will not do anything to fix that other person's vehicle. That is on your agency and your legal team, the JAG. They're the ones that individual actually would have to file a claim against the government to have their vehicle fixed. So that's what that process is. Alan says, what about using rental vehicles in territories of the U.S. such as Guam and or Puerto Rico? Well, they're territories of the U.S. and there's several vehicles down there. You're covered. Link to rental agreement number 5. It will be in the slide deck that you get tomorrow. Patrick says, is there a company to contact for Canadian insurance? Absolutely, there is. Patrick, send me an email and I will get you a name, email, and phone number. Is hands-off phone use acceptable during operation of the government vehicle? Kathleen, I cannot answer that because I don't know what agency you work for. And I would recommend that you not do it. So yeah, do no more than your career can handle.
Devin, can I chime on this one?
Sure.
On this one? While hands free means your hands are free to have both of them on the steering wheel, it does cause a major distraction for your brain. You're having a conversation with somebody who is not there in the vehicle with you to have eyes and ears also on the road, being aware of what's going on around you. It is a major distraction. Is it safer than having the phone in your hand? Sure. But the best thing you can do is if you are on the road and you get a call you need to take, pull off to the side safely as soon as you can and either call a person back or whatever you need to do. But it is about keeping yourself and everybody else on the road safe.
Melissa says, who pays for the toll fees? So it's on each agency to pay their own tolls. And right now, GSA, we do not have a solution yet for that. We're working on it. There's a lot of places that happens to have toll by plate. Pennsylvania's changed to toll by plate, but most of our vehicles have the little transponders for the tolling, and that's how they pay tolls here. Tanya says, we have employees that do on-site visits out of state or some areas that are more than 50 miles, and sometimes they may require to use the government vehicle, and sometimes they may want to take the vehicle overnight. In order to do this, are you saying that we must get approval from our chair, which is head of our agency, and not the director of our office? No, Tanya, you're mixing up home to work versus using a GOV for TDY travel. If you want to use that vehicle for TDY travel, which is fine, it has to be on a set of orders or whatever type of system you use to authorize that travel. Whoever that approval is, great, they're the approval. If you have home to work, which means they're taking that vehicle home and then going to work from it, that's that home to work authorization that is done by the head of the agency. Donald says, if your POV is damaged by storm debris during authorized official travel, would the insurance deductible be reimbursable? I don't know. Donald, I don't know. In that case, actually, our acts of nature, if you have full coverage or acts of nature, is there any deductible associated with it? I don't know. It depends on your insurance. Um, so a couple things to check. First off, talk to your insurance company. Just say, hey, I'm using it for official government travel, federal government travel. I get storm damage. Do I have to pay deductible? And if you do, you can submit for that reimbursement. Once again, like I said, you can submit. Doesn't mean it's going to be paid. Good question. All right. Since health of the employee is covered, could the argument be made that entertainment was for the mental health of the employee? No. No. Um, if you want to go for your mental health, absolutely. Just take an Uber or a Lyft. But if you've got a unique thing as far as like a workout area, say you do CrossFit, say you do something, unique, or you have a Planet Fitness, yeah, that's where that thing comes into play. Because if you want to go for that entertainment, we've got these instant little devices, our cell phones, or we can pull up any movie anytime. Even in hotels, they've got pay-per-view, things like that. I mean, there's always a way around that. But no, I wouldn't try and split that hair to say, well, hey, it's for my mental health going to entertainment. Josh says, am I allowed to take a GOV to my home to pack, collect a bag for the same day overnight travel if I found out the travel is necessary after I show up to work for the day and I'm on duty? Um, maybe, Josh. That isn't anything that I could authorize. But if you're going back home to pick up your stuff only to come back, I can't make a case for a government vehicle. But if you're going home, packing, and then going on your TDY, I could make a case for that as long as it's in writing and that's more advantageous to the government. All right. Wyatt says parking GSA vehicles in state or federal facilities, parking spaces. Is that permitted? Should it be should we be probably considerate of being towed or ticketed? So if you're going to park at a state or federal facility, and you're not part of that state or federal facility, work with whoever that building manager is. That way there's contacts in case anything happens. And just to let everyone know, that happens a lot. Agencies do park, say, federal vehicles at a post office just for security. In town, here for me locally, we do have some agencies that park that federal vehicles that park at a state facility just for protection. All right. And then Anthony says, just for contact, FM is fleet manager. And what Anthony was talking about was as far as who to contact or whose name to give. But if you're that driver, you need to give your name. And then you can the fleet manager as well, too. And then the follow-up for that, Anthony, make sure that whoever the drivers and whatnot know, contact JAG, contact the legal team right away. Chris says, do federal regulations have anything on use of GOV for MWR purposes? Our agency policy does not specifically cover MWR events. So I've always told my people to be safe and not use GOVs for MWR events. And Chris, you are absolutely right. Do not do that because that's personal use. Now, depends on your agency. I don't know what your agency is, but things like the VA, now they do use those, but it's things like buses where they're taking 15, 20, 30 veterans to say like a ball game or to actually, I've got pictures of this too, and it's comical because I understand it. And this was from Nevada, Reno. There was a government vehicle at a casino. What was a VA? And the casino offered veterans free meals on Veterans Day. That's absolutely authorized because that's their mission. If your mission is to use those GOVs for MWR events, then by all means you can, but just make sure that it's your mission. John
Devin,
says, go ahead.
sorry, this is somewhat for my own education. So if I understood your answer to that correctly, if a soldier is going to attend an MWR event, no GOV. But if your office is organizing an MWR event and you're using it to either get other people there or to get all of your supplies and things there, then it could be. So it kind of depends on, are you part of organizing it or are you just attending it? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. So there's a lot to unpack there,
Okay,
Stace.
sorry.
So in your scenario, if they're taking stuff to an event, are they part of that event? Are they displaying the flag for the national anthem? That's different. That's official use. If
Right,
they're going to be spectators of that, if they're
right.
going to be spectators strictly for seeing the movie or ball game or whatever, that would have to be official use as determined by the agency.
Okay.
Okay. In most cases, it's not, unless specifically, like the VA, that's their job, that's their mission. It is expressed to take care of veterans, and that's how they can do that. So, fine line. And one of those I would get, just like I've said before, that always on offense, get approval in writing before you do it. John says, are other military members on TDY with you allowed to drive the rental vehicle, or do they have to be on the agreement too? John, take a look at rental agreement number 5. The way I understand it is yes, depending on age of some and type of vehicle. There are some changes to rental agreement number 5, but look at that agreement beforehand and see what it says. Julia says, we're getting an agency van, U.S. courts. If I am driving the entire office to a district meeting as the driver, am I responsible for anything inappropriate any of my fellow coworkers have on them? Am I really responsible to search my coworkers? No, Julia. If they've got pot on them, hey, okay, they shouldn't. Or if they've got a weapon on them and they're not authorized, well, they shouldn't. No, that's not your job to search them. Your job is to get them to and from safely and operate that government motor vehicle in the best manner possible. Karen says, we have a storage unit on the other side of town. We often have to go there multiple times a week. When we drive there from the office, we should be using the GOV vehicles. Oftentimes people use their POV. Yeah, Karen, I would recommend you use the GOV. And I don't have an issue if they're using their POV. I mean, I don't like it. I don't recommend it. Um, but if they're going to use their POV, make sure they've got the okay in writing. And that number 2, and I didn't mention this, they should voucher for those miles because there's a document that shows official travel was done, it was used, and people are getting paid for it. Just some paperwork to back you up in case something happens. Camille says, are we allowed to drive 6 students home in the GOV vehicle? Camille, it would depend on your agency and what you're doing. If it's something like Job Corps, absolutely, you got to get students to and from. But I would need a little bit more information about what you're specifically referring to. So if you want to, you can shoot me an email. It's still up there on the board. Deb says, if you take your personal vehicle on a work trip and are in an accident, who covers the accident? Well, Deb, you do. You're going to pay for your own vehicle. And if you're in your vehicle, you have authorization to be in your private vehicle, and you're within your scope of employment, then the government should step in for you under the Federal Tort Claims Act and cover the third party claim. But make sure all those Legos are put together and in place before you take your POV for government vehicle use. Karen says, what about a soldier who hits a government vehicle and PCSs before everything is settled? Well, if they've PCSed, you still can reach out and touch them. And just because they're not necessarily on station doesn't mean that they can't be held responsible. We've got some pretty long arms in the military, and that person, it's what I'm saying. It's not an issue, Karen. Doesn't matter where they're at. If you've got all the information and you know who it was, absolutely, you can still go after that person. It's not a big deal. Scott says, I occasionally have to deliver supplies 2 hours from my workplace while driving through a large city to deliver supplies. I find it a stressful drive. Is it improper to take a different route home than that bypasses a large city? Scott, I could not make a case to where anyone would get on you for that. That's not, I cannot see that as deviating from your route. You're taking a safer route to get around the city. Yeah, I'm not much of a fan of that close traffic myself. and I will take, I'll go on the bypass to get around. Be prepared to justify. Why did you do that? Well, Waze said it would be like a 45-minute trip going through the city, but if I take this detour around here, it's 15. There you go. Tricia says, did we address using your phone for maps? Um, a lot of our vehicles have either Android or Apple CarPlay to where you could hook that up. But like Stacy said, before you drive, get it hooked up, get your map route set. And as long as you're not using your phone, that's what you shouldn't be doing. But if you have it hooked up to, say, the Apple CarPlay or the Android Auto, you use it and let it talk to you. That's the best way to do it. Gerald says, back to the hands-free device question. If the GOV does not have a built-in GPS and it does not have portable GPS, can a phone be used strictly for navigation? Possibly. I would ask your agency, what is their policy? And if they say no cell phone use, handheld cell phone use, then that's the policy, no handheld cell phone use. The other option, get it set, whether you use Waze, Google Maps, or Apple Maps, have it talk to you, left turn 200 feet. I actually like Waze because Waze talks a lot. But just don't hit, except for the points and all that stuff. All right, Wyatt says, concern of being towed. But I think we answered the question as far as hers was the state and or federal building parking. Craig says, what if I hit a dog in a government vehicle and does damage? Is it covered by the government? Well, so, that's unique. All right. So it's no different than, say, if you hit a deer. Basically, the cost would be billed to your agency, whoever is leasing that vehicle, or if it's an agency owned. Paul says, so use of POV should be obtained prior to use so the government vehicles are available. Typically, employees do not ask to use POV for field work, but when the voucher is submitted, they know that reimbursement is at the lower rate. Paula, what you're saying scares me a little bit. It concerns me. Do they have a blanket approval to use POVs for field work? Or I should say use your POVs instead of a GOV. If that's the case, yeah, you're good. You're getting reimbursed at the lower rate. But remember, I was talking about selective amnesia, to where a supervisor can say, I never gave you permission. I don't know why you're using your government vehicle. You shouldn't be, even though they gave you permission a couple days ago. So in this case, and I'll give you an example, Social Security, in their motor vehicle management policy, it states in there, one of the paragraphs, and this is from years and years ago, I don't know if it's been updated, but it said POV use is authorized. So it's in a policy. It can be done. So they need to, they need to voucher for miles. But in your case, I would make sure that they have permission beforehand. But more important than this, they need to contact their insurance company and find out if their use for government business is authorized. And here's why. If you're using that vehicle for government work and you get into a vehicle accident, the insurance company is going to find out. They're going to find out what was going on. And if you're not covered, then you might have to pay out of pocket. And that just would be very, very uncomfortable. So it's easier to ask permission in this case instead of forgiveness. Is it supervisor responsibility to let employees know that GOVs are available and not to use POVs if POV is convenient for the employees? Yes. And the reason that I say is if a GOV is available, it should be known so that people don't have to use their POVs. And here's the other part. You as a supervisor can't mandate that your employee use their POV for government work. Period. Adam, you're very welcome. Adam said, thank you for the training. So you can't say, hey, well, there's no GOVs available. You have to use your POV. No, what if they don't have, what if their insurance won't cover them? If you do that, you might be taking on the liability for that person's car. You can't force them. So I would come up with, say, GSAfleet.gov has dispatch. You could use the dispatch module for, making sure vehicles are available, and or at least let people know some way, somehow, that a GOV is available. Walter said, Walter, I think you asked this question last week. It says, how do agency-owned vehicles, say the water truck, backhoe, club cart type vehicles, covered by insurance, and what is the guidance? Walter, it's exactly the same. Everything that I just presented is the same for anything agency owned, no matter what it is, as long as it's owned by the government. So for you, as long as it's official training, or I'm sorry, official business, then you're good. All the other stuff that we said applies. And Brian, same thing. He said, thank you. You're very welcome for the training. But make sure that you're doing the right thing. Make sure it's official. And then you're covered under the Federal Tort Claims Act. If you hit a third party, your agency is going to pay that third party claim. Possibly, depending on the outcome of, say, the FLIPL or the reporter survey or the BORDA survey, the investigation, you as an employee or you as a driver or the other drivers may have to pay for the damage to the government vehicle. Colleen says, I intend to late. How can I access a recording? Colleen, we don't have it recorded yet. Well, it's still recording, but we have to get 508C compliance first before it gets loaded, and it will be on our YouTube channel. The other thing that you can actually do is, so we have 2 more classes, and if you'd like, sign up for those again as well. We're going to send out a reminder, and yeah, attend again and encourage other people to attend if you found value. Tony says, being that we had a reduction of our fleet of cars and some of our offices do not have a GOV, would the employees still be covered if they use their personal vehicle? If they're authorized, yes, Tanya. And like I said before, if you don't have a vehicle for your office, you can't force them to use their private vehicle. So if you need, oh gosh, that's, and I'm seeing a lot more of that in some of these other comments here in the questions as well. Yeah, they would be allowed if it's authorized, but get it authorized in writing and make sure, and then whoever uses their vehicle for POV, use their POV for government business, voucher for those miles. Tim says, is leased by the government considered the same as owned by the government? Nope. Owned is owned and leased is leased. They're still government assets. Okay. Let me clarify that. If it's a GSA lease, it's government owned. Okay. If it's a agency owned, it's owned by the agency, it's government owned. If you have, say, a commercial lease that is not owned by the government, and those are handled a little differently. If it's a lease like that, they're just billing you for everything as far as the damage goes on the vehicle. But the Federal Tort Claims Act should apply if we're using a commercial lease. So in that case, Tim, what I would do, reach out to your agency, ask them, hey, if you have a commercial lease or anything along those lines, ask them, how are we covered if something happens? Ask that question. And if it's commercial, the agency is just going to bill you for the damage for the vehicle. But if there's a third party claim, then that's got to be hashed out. We have a question here. Is a GSA.gov account required for anyone who wants to register for this session? Absolutely not. Nope, not at all. This session is free of charge, and you do not need a GSA fleet.gov account. Where can the mileage reimbursement form be found when POV use is used for official duties? I'll tell you, Shiloh, work with whoever your oh gosh, fleet manager was one, but whoever does your travel vouchers, if you have a travel person, and it might actually be an electronic travel voucher. That's what it is for me. So, but yeah, ask. It's going to be agency specific, so start there. Armando says this might be agency specific. Besides the obvious, U.S. government plate. Do government vehicles need additional branding and tags? No, just the license plates. There are some agencies that do decide to put a little bit more branding on. If you put anything on a GSA fleet vehicle, it has to be approved via a modification. So if you want to do something like that, you have to submit the modification form per vehicle, unless you have a lot of them. We could actually look at a blanket mod. And then it gets sent up, gets approved with pictures. You have to show what you actually want to do. But if it's agency owned, then you deal with your own agency, whatever they have decided. Nicole says, I'm not sure if this was covered. If I am enrolled in an official training 3 days, almost 2 hours away, but lodging is not authorized, can I drive a GOV to the training and to a friend's house if I plan to stay instead of driving home 2 hours each way? If not allowed, would it be okay to leave POVs at event overnight and get a ride to a friend's house for lodging? POV mileage reimbursement is also not authorized. Nicole, you've got an issue because if you're 2 hours away, you're more than 50 miles. What I would do, I'd go to HR. Something is not right with what you're telling me. Because if you're 2 hours away and over 50 miles, this is a trust but verify. If you're over 50 miles, I believe you have to be on travel if it's overnight. But do not quote me on that. Look into it. Ask HR because this isn't passing the smell test. So if you're driving a GOV, no, you can't take that GOV to your friend's house because that is considered personal use. You might be able to leave it at the venue where the training is and Uber or whatnot to your friend's house. That could be possible. The biggest issue you have is getting the okay from your agency, and is the parking lot where it's at secure? Is it a safe place to leave it? So, really good question. I'm sorry that you're in this position, but yeah, I would ask questions because, like I say, that's not passing the smell test for me. All right. Edward says, if there is not a government owner-owned vehicle at my duty station and need to go to another location to get the vehicle, do I need to get authorization for personal vehicle and ensure that my personal insurance covers my POV? What if I cannot get coverage from my insurance company for POV uses? How do I get to the other location to get the vehicle? That's a great question, Edward. It sounds like you need another vehicle. But yes, to your two questions, if you have to go to another location to get a government vehicle, you should be paid mileage for that because you have to use your POV to get from one place to the other. Now, you might have a weird dynamic to where you work out of both, to where you could have went to the other office. I don't know. But in this case, a couple places I want you to talk to: fleet manager, um, human resources, and talk to talk to your legal counsel, because that's something that should be addressed beforehand. All right. Got another question. Where to find recorded session to share with team if they are unavailable to attend the sessions? It will be posted on our YouTube channel. And we will not get this posted until April because we take the best session and then we'll go through and we post it there. But yeah, it's the same exact. It's going to be one of the next three. Could be this one. Not sure. But yeah, it'll be posted on our YouTube page. Israel says, is there anything required for when your car has state or undercover plates? Yes. If you have an agency owned or a GSA fleet lease vehicle and you have undercover plates, you have that GSA accident kit. So in a case like that, you're going to have to blow your cover if there's an accident. Just say, hey, I'm a federal employee doing police work or whatnot, and show them that. The proof of insurance is on that kit that's in the glove box for GSA vehicles. So that's about the only change. All right. Folks, you're still 640 you there. We had about 1,000 people today. I really appreciate everyone attending. If there's any more questions, throw them in there. If not, my email's up. But other than that, everyone have a good night, have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week. Okay, got a couple more. Jessica says, I have 2 interns with me on this recording. How do I ensure they get credit for this training too? Their names don't matter. Did they register for the class, Jessica? So what you could do, you're going to get the slides and then also the certificate, and then you can get their names in on it. Anthony says, regarding provide emergency assistance, well, a DOD M45. Okay, so unique to Anthony, he's a DOD guy. He's got for DOD, it looks like that's the reference for them to provide where it would be official use for them to provide emergency care of that vehicle. DOD M 4500.36. Everyone, thank you for the kind comments. I do appreciate it. And my hope is get as many drivers in this as you can, or any supervisors. Get the word out, because this stuff is so we got an email from Randall, but it's from Deborah. Deborah, no, unfortunately, we cannot do that because we record. Everything is automatic. And when you register and you attend, it will automatically send that stuff to you. So what I need you to do, we've got 2 more sessions. Go ahead and register for one of them. You have to listen to my boring voice for another hour, but I might even give you a little bit more. Paula, our fleet train. Stace, you want to take that one? Paula says, how do employees register for the next event?
Yeah, so the same website I put in there a couple of times, to the GSA Fleet Resource Center, is going to be your best place now to bookmark. We used to have a couple different places, but we are trying to consolidate that down. In order to get to these things in the Resource Center, you do not have to have a GSA Fleet.gov account. Our training information is available before you log in. Um, and so that has a link to where you can go register for future sessions, and I'll put it in the Q&A again. Um, but then also that's then where we have our playlist link for the YouTube channel. So that's part of why I'm starting to give people that link, because it is now your sort of one-stop shop for everything, instead of giving you, well, here's the link to watch recordings, here's the link to look at what's upcoming. It just kind of puts it all in one place for you.
Evelyn has a question here. Says, thank you. I just know we have a ton of great questions, and I would like to have them as a reference and would hate not to have the information if this is one isn't recorded that is uploaded. So actually, so Evelyn, we do not send the question. We don't include the question and answer because things could change and we don't want to give out bad information. So that's one of the things that we don't do, and it's just to protect everyone, to make sure that what we're giving uh, is good. Melinda, right? I'm sorry, Melinda. I almost told your last name. You're very welcome for the training. Um, I'm glad that you have the training for everyone in the FAA. That is awesome. Thank you so much. And Evelyn, great comment. She says it makes sense, but it would be nice. I do agree with you. You've got my email. You got something unique, don't hesitate to reach out. I get questions all year long, so all good. And
Devin,
Anthony,
I want to take that one step further. What I
sure.
think would be really nice is if agencies actually had some of this information documented based on their internal agency policy, so that way it gets it it gets you an even more precise answer to your questions. Um, and again, that's part of it too. A lot of our answers are, maybe talk with so and so. So that's also part of it there too, right? Is that we don't know your specific agency policy.
Thanks. Anthony says, appreciate you, Devin, and the GSA team. Your briefings are always informative, entertaining, and helpful. Anthony and I have a long history, and it's all good. And I appreciate your input, Anthony. Thank you for sending that stuff about the DODM. It's nice. That's what makes these so much better, because I'll take that information and include it. So thank you very much. Cindy says, does the safety office still issue government motor vehicle operator certificate or certification card? Maybe. What I can say is I believe, I'm not sure if it's necessarily the safety office, Cindy, but if you have like a transportation office, it might be them. So yeah, I'm not so sure it's a safety office. Walter's going to brief his folks there at the FAA and at their all hands meeting. So awesome, Walter. Glad to hear it. All right. Karen says, I've been forwarding this link to all the employees in my district, but unfortunately, I was informed by our safety office that I cannot enforce the driver's awareness training that was once required in order to drive a GOV, lease, or own vehicle since it was removed from our EM. And that's okay, Karen. Um, the only analogy I have, you can lead a horse to water, and that's all right. I appreciate you reaching out and to your team. And really, it's hopefully they take and they watch that. But yeah, you're right. You can't make them, and that's absolutely okay. Um, we'll have the recording later, and they can at least watch it there. So awesome. Well, thank you so much. All right, folks, we're going to close this down. My email's there. Feel free to email if you have anything else. And that's all we got. We'll see you next week, everyone. Thank you.